episode number 84, the ITU Duathlon World Championships with Mike Buenting. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in there for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have a real treat for you. I get to hear about the ITU World Championship Duathlon in Denmark and talk with Mike Buenting, where he had a time of 1 hour, 53 minutes, and 57 seconds. This race took place on July 6th, 2018, where the temperature was 61 and rose to 72. He's been doing races for 12 years with many marathons and triathlons in the mix. Welcome to the show, Mike. I look forward to hearing about your race in Denmark.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. So I'm really excited to hear about your story. What made you want to do this race or even attempt to qualify for this race?
So I love the sport of duathlon. I wish, there was more of them around. In Minnesota where I live, it seems like it's kind of a spring and a fall sport. And then once the water is warm enough for us to swim in, everything's triathlon. So I did my first World Championships of Duathlon back in 2013 in Ottawa, Canada. And that year I took third. I was on the podium, bronze, and I had a mechanical issue with a bike that cost me probably winning the race. And then I raced 2017 World Championships of Duathlon in Penticton, Canada. And that's how I qualified for this race in Denmark, because I was the top American last year in Penticton. So as the top American, USA Triathlon sent me an invite and asked if I wanted to go to Denmark. Wasn't totally planning to go there, but you got an invite and the family says, let's go for a vacation. You go race.
Right.
And yeah.
So for the people that don't know the qualifying standards and how to qualify and get into these types of races, walk me through that process.
So USA Triathlon has national championships, and usually you got to qualify or sign up and go race national championships. And then at national championships, they will have so many slots allotted per age group to race the different distances. I've been racing standard distance, which is a 10K run, a 40K bike, and a 5K run. But they also have a sprint distance, which is 5K run, 20K bike, 2.5K run. And sprint distance is now draft legal, where standard distance that I race is non-drafting. And so in 2015, I guess, 2016, 2015, whatever year that was, I went out to Bend, Oregon to race national championships at duathlon. And that year in Bend, Oregon, I won national champion. So I was the winner of that race, qualified for 2017 Penticton World Championships of ITU. And so then I went there and raced, and then, they're top American. So then they invited me back this year to 2018 in Denmark to race World Championships. So
Okay.
that's kind of the path. So I did not race national championships this year, which were in Greenville, South Carolina, I believe it is, back in April. So
Okay. Now, you've been doing triathlons and racing for nearly 12 years now. Before that, did you have a background in any of the three sports?
So my background is as a runner. In high school, I was a cross country runner and a track runner. So distance. In fact, my 4x8 team still holds my high school record. So that was kind of my background in running. And then when I got and I kind of got away from running for a long time. And I actually played basketball for a long time. I thought I was a pickup basketball player, played with a lot of ex-NBA players and stuff like that, just for fun to stay fit, while I worked in the music business. So then my athletic, staying healthy and fit type of stuff was just playing pickup basketball games while I worked in the music business. And I kind of got away from running. And then what happened is some friends of mine moved here from Colorado, and she was training for the Twin Cities Marathon. And I said to her, hey, I'm going to go out and run this like 10-mile run with her one day or something like that. And she's like a 5-hour marathoner. And here I am going out and she drops me and kicks my butt on this 10-mile run. And I'm like, all right, something's got to change. I got to get myself back in shape and healthy. And it was sort of my wake up call and then that's where my addiction into multi-sport and endurance racing kind of came from. Because at that time I was 40 pounds heavier than I am. So, then I shifted and got in. And then her husband was a cyclist. So that's where I started kind of getting back into biking. Because as a kid in high school, I had a road bike. I had my Schwinn road bike with my down tube shifters, and I loved it. I rode my bike everywhere, miles and miles, go see girlfriends or whatever, So it was in me back then. I just never put it together racing until this moment where I got together and met Shannon and Dave, and Dave biked, Shannon ran, and, I started kind of doing it. And then next thing you know, I'm like, I'm going to sign up for a triathlon and dive in and go for it. And then I'm going to sign up for a marathon, and so I did. And then, quickly the goals got to be, more and more. And now it's my addiction. It's what I do. If I don't train, I'm miserable.
Right. So now going into this race, if we take a look at the previous 4 months of your training, what would that look like for you?
So I really switched things up this year for 2018 to my years past. Normally, so for the past 12 years, I've been running 2 to 3 marathons a year. I ran Boston Marathon every year. And so I've run Boston Marathon for the last 9 consecutive years until 2018. So typically leading into my multi-sport season, I would be very run heavy and be kind of more in a marathon training cycle than this year. So this year I decided I'm not going to run Boston. My focus is on triathlon because I'm racing World Championships for triathlon in the Gold Coast of Australia in September. And then I did Ironman 70.3 Madison, Wisconsin race back in June. So those are kind of my 2 races. Denmark didn't come into my picture till March because that's kind of when I got my invite to come race. So when I got into January, I designed my plan around, I joined master swim class and started swimming 3 to 4 days a week. Our winter was really brutal in Minnesota, so I lived on my Wahoo kicker doing Zwift rides or Sufferfest rides. So until May, my training was mostly swimming and biking. I would get outside because I don't run on treadmills. I only run outdoors. So I was only running outdoors. I mean, I was a guy in 2017, 2016, I would say I'd run between 60 and 70 miles a week. And then all of a sudden now I was down to like 25 to 30 miles a week, maybe. I was running instead of 6-7 days a week, I'm running, 3 or 4 days a week. And so during the winter months, because our winter was so harsh here, so cold, so much snow, it really limited me getting outside to run. So it really forced me to spend more focus on my bike. So I was probably biking 7 to 10 hours a week on my Wahoo kicker. And then I was swimming, like I said, 3 to 4 days a week. And each swim would be about 3,500 yards or so. So, I was kind of in there and then running. And, and then I focused on, with the biking, you start to build plans around, working on building up your strength. And I do an FTP test every month, so I'd get on Sufferfest and do what what do they call it? Like a 4DP or whatever testing. It's a little different than a traditional FTP test. And so I'd get my numbers set and then I'd do a month worth of workouts and I'd retest and just watch that number grow and grow and grow, and then as I got into Zwift and you start riding, and you see your watts per kilo and all that kind of stuff. And you start riding Alpe d'Huez and these crazy climbs and having fun. So that was kind of my training until May. And then when our weather got nice and I was able to start getting outside and race, my first race would have been the Apple Duathlon, which is Memorial Day weekend. So I was able to do that. And then the next weekend do a sprint triathlon. And then on June 10th, I did the 70.3 Madison. And then it was just a month of preparing for Denmark after that.
Okay. Now, what was your longest swim, bike, and runs going into this? I know this is a 10K run. a 40K bike ride, and a 5K run. And you're wanting to train intensity, not the long course stuff that this podcast is normally known for, but this is all about intensity. You want to be able to run fast, bike fast, transition fast, speed everywhere. How was your longest bike rides and runs and swims going into this?
So because I was also training for a 70.3 at the same time as this, I really built up a lot of endurance. So biking, I was doing every weekend, Saturday or Sunday on my Wahoo Kicker, I'd get on and ride between 2 and 2.5 hours. I'd have at least one ride per week at that length. Otherwise, most of my rides were somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour during the week. And so that's kind of where that was. Swims, a lot of, whatever Masters was bringing at us, I was averaging, about 3,500 yards per swim practice. So we would usually have one day a week where it'd be a distance set, doing a bunch of 400s or 500s. And then you have one day a week where it's a lot of sprints, 25s and 50s that are really pushing your anaerobic, capacity there on short rest. So that's kind of with my swimming and biking, and the same with the biking. I mean, I would always get one really good endurance ride in a week that was at least 2 hours, where I was more focused on not going anaerobic, but sitting there in that fat burning zone, sitting there just kind of building endurance, nice and steady and smooth. And then I'd have probably 2 or 3 more intense workouts during the week, one that would be kind of hill based where it was like really loading up the watts and really pushing yourself like a hill climbs. And then one that would be more speed based, shorter intense intervals that way. And I always focus my riding on cadence. As a duathlete, and even as a triathlete, you want to ride fast, right? That's going to help you with your run. If you want to come off the bike running fast and feeling good, you want to try to mimic that run cadence. And my run cadence is, about 180. So, 90 RPMs on a bike, right? So I'm trying to, when I'm riding, no matter what watts I'm pushing, I'm trying to ride 90 to 95 RPMs.
Okay.
And push. And so I ride with pretty high cadence. And same with my run. My run stride's really efficient and that way. So that's kind of how I build things. I work in whatever gear, pushing whatever watts are there, as long as I can maintain that cadence I want to be at. And if I can't maintain that cadence, if my cadence starts to dip down into the 70s or something, then I got to get into a different gear or back the watts off or something in order to get my cadence back up where I want it. And as I build and do enough rides, then you start to get stronger. So now you can push 275 watts at a 90 RPM cadence and maintain it or whatever. So that's kind of how I ramped myself up and built myself. And I really try to focus my cycling on my cadence as much as I can. Now, of course, everybody, you hit climbs that are 13%, and you're just going to sit there and somewhat grind. But even on those, I try to keep up in the 80, 85 range, when I'm climbing, and just get in whatever gear I need to match that cadence.
Right. Now, you're a coach. How did you lay out your plan for this? Was it the typical 1-2 week build and then take a week cut back and then continue the process over? Maybe a 3-week build or 4-week build? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm usually kind of about probably a 3-week build before I start to back off a little bit. And I usually go 10 to 12 days before I take any kind of rest, but I don't take a lot of rest in this year in my cycle because my run mileage is down. So my body was able to handle, 6-7 days a week of kind of going, but it's more focused on my intensity. And I look at, when I build a training plan, I look at more of where the key workouts are going to land. And then I find that the recovery type workouts can land on certain days and they're good for you. When I'm looking at a marathon training plan, I look at it much different than this because the high run miles is what I find fatigues the body, puts you in more of a hurt thing than spinning your legs on a bike or jumping in the water to just go for a nice, easy swim. So I every day, at least one day a week, I always would plan, what I would call my rest day might be a 40-minute, just really light spin at, 50% of FTP, just something to kind of flush the legs, ride smooth, watch a movie on Netflix or something, and just kind of go like that, and then place my intense workouts, always with a day of something easier in between. So I try not to ever have an intense run workout and then the next day do another intense type of workout. I kind of try to space them every other day. So that's kind of how I looked at things. And then I look at the body of work. So I look at my week, build, right? Of how many hours a week do I want to ride? How many miles a week do I want to run? And how much swimming do I want to do? And then just kind of build it that way so that it's a slow build. So I'm not adding much more than 5-10% to any one of those per week as I build. And then you get that week where I back down the mileage and the hours to kind of let a little recovery happen, even if you're staying active. And then the next time I start, I reset from that highest build week and build again until I get to, maximum of where I need to be,
Now, with this training that you went into, what was your highest FTP that you tested at?
So I think my FTP was at, what was it, like 280, 275, somewhere in there.
Okay. And you're about 148, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's a really good, at least in my mind, it's a good watt to kilo ratio.
Right.
Okay. Now, if we take a look at your training again and we look at the run workouts that you were doing that was intense, building up into this, what did that look like?
So getting ready for a duathlon like this, because I'm running 10Ks and 5Ks at pretty high intensities, a lot of my speed type workouts were more 400s or 800 based at 5K effort, somewhere right in there. I've kind of changed this year, and I don't let myself, even when I go to the track sometimes, and I'd be running with other training partners and becomes kind of a little bit of the ego macho thing out there. And we start running and pushing each other hard. And next thing you know, you realize you're running, 70-second 400s. And you're like, well, that's not a pace I'm going to hold and race at. So I really this year have tried to focus on reeling that back, even though sure, I can go run 15 400s at, 70, 73 in a workout with recovery and find myself really focusing more on getting into that steady rhythm, that pace, that groove that I'll run a 5K at. Maybe dialing them back into an 80 and 85 or something like that. So 400s and 800s are kind of my really go-to distances when I'm doing speed. But then I also do instead of a track all the time, I use road loops because I like to get the feel of a road that, undulates. You got your little ups, your little downs, some turns, whatever. So there's a town of Excelsior close to me, and I've designed some road loops down there that are, say, about a mile, a little over a mile. And I'll go down there and run those at a certain tempo, a certain effort pace. And that's so one day a week, I always do some sort of speed tempo work. And then I usually would, and then I pretty much always have one day where it's a little bit more of an endurance distance kind of run. And then one day I'll probably do something where I mix it up. It's either, some hills for some strength, or else it's kind of just like a steady progression tempo run. Once I get warmed up, get the body going after, then I'll just kind of settle into 10K pace or something and hold it for 4 or 5 miles and back it down and cool down and kind of like that.
Okay. Now, whenever you go to the track and you do these 400s and 800s, how many repetitions are you doing?
So that's a build too throughout my season. So I may start early season, and if I'm doing 400s or something, I may only do 8 of them. And then every couple weeks as I do them, I start to add a couple, and I probably get up to doing somewhere between 15 and 20 as a max. And then, with 800s, I may start at like 4 of them and then start building up to 8 or 10 of them in a session.
Okay. Now, whenever you look at your training, how much strength training were you doing?
Strength training? So so I don't do a lot of weight training. I do, when it comes to strength training, I do, just planks, sit-ups, push-ups, stuff that you use your kind of body weight for. Right. And I can do at home. So I don't belong to a fitness center or anything like that. So it's just
planks, push-ups, sit-ups, maybe some bird dogs.
Yeah, like squats, wall sits, a few things like that. So, I probably do more just core work than I do the other stuff. So I'd probably say, 2 or 3 times a week I was, this year I would say I'm probably a little lighter on those things than I used to be. and maybe that's just because of all the swimming and everything else I'm doing, and I'm kind of working that. So maybe 2 or 3 days a week, I'd be, doing 4 or 5 minutes of planks, 100 sit-ups, 50 to 100 push-ups, something like that, just kind of cranking it out while I'm maybe stretching at the end of a workout or something.
Okay. Now, if we look at how many bricks you did you do any bricks where you might have brought your bike to the track and did bricks that way?
No, I always do my bricks from home, and I did a lot of bricks for this race. So this year I probably got into doing a lot more bricks than normal. And so I always do them from my house, and I do a lot of loops. So some athletes get bored doing these short loops, but I like to do loops a lot of times because it's easy for me to fuel, hydrate, practice transitioning, various things like that. So for duathlon, I probably got into a cycle of once a week where I would go out for a 3 or 4 mile run, and then I'd jump on my bike and go out, maybe ride 10 miles or whatever, and then come back, go out for maybe a 2-mile run, and then I start to repeat. Sometimes I repeat that. So it depends. Some days I was doing longer distances in there, but then some days I have this thing where I just kind of get on a circuit where I do run, bike, run, run, bike, run. I just keep going over and over and over.
Right. I've heard of one Ironman athlete where he did a 20-mile bike ride and a 5-mile run 4 times. And that was his big workout. And as long as he was going negative instead of positive, he could continue. But whenever his 20-mile time on the bike went positive from the next one, he had to stop that round. So that's how you know that you're getting the fatigue that you want.
Right. I like that. I do that in swim like today. I know in my swim workout, we were on a set of so many 50s and then so many 25s, and we were supposed to get faster. But then as I saw my 50 times start to dwindle, I said, I know that the workout calls for some more, but I think my body's had enough, and I just stopped.
Right.
And that's the thing as athletes, I think, in training, racing, in training, not necessarily racing, obviously. In racing, we push our limits to the max. But in training, I think we got to listen to our bodies and get in tune with our bodies to know there's some days, no matter, I know a lot of us are all type A, and we have coaches and different things that give us certain workouts. But some days our bodies aren't ready for that workout. And we got to know, hey, it's okay to stop and cut it short, because if we continue on, we'll do more damage to ourselves than if we just called it here and said, look, our body's not feeling it today. We just need to let it go.
Completely agree with you. And that's when the communication line needs to be completely open and say, hey, look, this is too much too soon. Cool. You just need to know that.
Exactly. And there's a lot of times I write these workouts for myself and these progressions, and on paper, it makes sense that you would be at that level. But the day comes and, we're work life, family life, sleep might not have been so good. You get up and you get out there and you start trying to crank out this workout, and then you realize, man, I ain't feeling it today. I'm tired. My splits are slipping, like you just said. They starting to go positive. That's when you just say, enough's enough. Let's just back off, call it a day, and restart tomorrow.
Right. Now, mentally, were there any days where you just did not want to train?
No, mentally, I'd say, I've had that in the past, but I would say for whatever reason, this year, 2018, something's flipped in me, and mentally, I'm in one of the best places I've been in years, and I'm feeling energized, and I'm feeling positive all the time, and I'm loving it, and I love the training. I love to race and I love to compete because I'm a really competitive person, but I love to train. And so the only days that are ever tough on me are during my tapers and the extra rest days, and when my workload starts to come back. And then those couple days post-race, I call them my post-race blues, Those are the only times that mentally maybe I struggle, but for the most part, I'm always pretty fired up to get up and get going and get into my day.
So how did you get into this mindset that you're in that is so positive and always wanting to work out, and actually you're fired up to do all these workouts all season long? How did you get to that?
It's, many years of doing this, been doing it for a while, I've been racing. I train and hang out with a lot of other athletes, and, you start to see how they react to things, and then I've been that way in the past where I've reacted that way. And I just said to myself, I really got to change and stay positive. Things, the world's a messed up place. Things can always be worse. And I just found a place of gratitude, of thankful for my health and thankful that I can do these things. And I read a lot of motivational books and a lot of, kind of more spiritual things to get myself into that. And then I try to write that way. So I try to write a lot of stuff like that, to just put down that type of stuff and daily affirmations and things of that nature, that is just kind of try to keep your mind in a really positive place. And then you just say, I look at myself all the time and say, hey, God's given me this gift to swim, bike, run, whatever. I'm not going to waste it, and I'm not going to, let it go. So I'm going to use it, and I'm going to take advantage of it, because who knows how long I'm going to be on this earth. So this is what makes me happy and I love to do. So I just get up and go do it.
Okay. In a short answer, how long was your taper for this race?
For Denmark, I'd say I probably tapered 10 days.
Okay, 10 days. Now, what specific workouts did you do before that 10-day period that gave you the confidence to go into this race prepared?
So it was a couple of my last bricks where I had my last intense workout was a 5-mile run. That now I tried not to run that at high intensity, even though in this race, obviously the 10K is going to be really high intensity, but I put myself, I'd call it a 80 to 85% effort level for about 5 miles. And then I went out and biked 30 miles, between 25 and 30 miles, I think is what my loop was. I can't remember the exact mileage, but then I rode that pretty high intensity. Like I mixed intervals in. When I ride here, I got to cut through a downtown of a small town. So you got a little bit of slow stuff, but once I got to the open roads, I really picked up my tempo, my cadence. I got in like I was putting in a race effort. And then I rolled back, and then I went out for another, like basically 5K. And that 5K, I told myself, I'm coming off the bike. It's go time. And that one I was going to let myself go. And so that was my last really hard key workout where I let myself really go. And then, of that nature, and it went well, and I felt good because, it was super hot and humid here that day, and I survived it. I got, my nutrition that I use, my hydration, my electrolytes type of stuff worked well that day.
What do you use?
I use F2C. So that was probably one of the best things that came out of Penticton, Canada 2017 Worlds is I met Greg and Glenda, the owners and designers, developers of F2C Nutrition, which is a British Columbia-based nutrition company. And they were the on-course stuff that we used that year during the race, and they were in the expo. So I sampled their products. And I've used a lot of nutrition over the years, tons of different stuff. And this stuff was just like, I loved it. The taste was good and how it made me feel. And that year when I raced 2017 in Penticton, I had strained my hamstring going into the race. So I was running in absolute pain. Like there's no way I probably should even finish that race, but I ran through extreme pain, and it was warm in Penticton. And on the run course, we had mango flavored Glyco Endurance by F2C. And every time I got a cup of that, it was like a jolt of energy. Like it was good. So when I came home, I got online, ordered a whole ton of it up, and started training with it. And I loved it so much that I reached out to them, and now I'm, on their team. I'm a sponsored athlete with F2C. And when I go into that type of stuff, I make sure I use it and pay retail, whatever, and that I like a product, because I don't want to just go represent something unless I really, truly believe in it. So that's how it is with F2C. I call it the game changer. Ever since it came into my life, like I've been able to cut out a lot of different nutritional things and just stick to their products, and I'm good to go.
Wow. Now, as far as your training goes, you mentioned your family a little bit with your wife and your daughter. So when you're not training or spending time with your family, what are you doing?
Oh, I love music. So I work in the music business. I manage and book tours for bands and stuff like that. So I go to a lot of concerts, spend a lot of time out at night, going and watching live music, listening to music. So I also sell real estate. So I have a real estate license. So I work. And then I love college football. So I watch a lot of college football in the fall, and I like baseball. So go Cubs.
Who's your teams? Okay. Cubs?
I'm a Chicago Cubs in baseball. Love my Cubs. Chicago Bears in NFL, but they're not so good. And then I'm an Iowa Hawkeye. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa area, so I'm a hardcore Hawkeye fan. So I love college wrestling. I love college football. My Iowa Hawkeyes. Those are my sports. I started to get into soccer, even though I don't totally understand the game. I got a lot of European friends, and then being in Denmark this year racing during the World Cup and watching soccer with them was pretty intense. So I'm starting to like that game a lot more. I just haven't quite settled on watching it all the time and who I really root for, other than it's just kind of a fun game to watch.
Right. Now, how big of an issue was balancing life, work, training, watching sports, being a part of sport, and all that? How hard was that to balance?
For me, it can get tough, but I'm pretty focused on things, and I don't let. And that's probably been one of my biggest changes over years. Early on in my career, work would interfere with some of this stuff more than it does now. Now, training and racing is like numero uno. So I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I get out the door and I do my workouts by 5:30 in the morning, usually, because I know my day is not going to. No, there's not very many people looking for me at 5:30 in the morning in the work world. So I know if I make myself go to bed early and get up and get out there and start my training and make sure that's the first thing I do in the day, I'll get it in. So I'm pretty diligent about that, and I've learned how to really manage my time and get around it. Now, one of the benefits for me with family is that my wife runs also. Not at the pace as I do, so we don't get to run together, but she likes to get up and run too. And my daughter is a very serious athlete herself. You know, she's 15 years old, and so she'll be racing world championships of triathlon this September also with me. So we get to be part of Team USA together, which is pretty cool. So I get to do a lot of training with her as far as the running and biking goes. She's on the high school swim team, so she does all of her swimming there. And, you know, we'll go to open water and swim some together, but she swims at a whole nother pace than I do. It's not even like her. We raced recently, her 100 butterfly to my 100 freestyle, and she beat me by 15 seconds or more.
God. So she's swimming at what, like 220?
Well, she can throw down 100 fly in like a minute. So, yeah.
Man, that's quick.
Yeah. So it helps me in the balance of that our whole family is geared around triathlon and running, and so it's really a way of life in our family here.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and start transitioning a little bit to this actual race. When did you start traveling to the race from Minnesota?
From Minnesota. So our flight left on July 3rd, like 3:00 in the afternoon. We flew to Copenhagen through the night, basically. I think we got to Copenhagen on July 4th at like 9 in the morning, rented a car, drove 2 hours out to Odense where the race was, and got there the afternoon, July 4th. And then my race was on July 6th. So,
okay. Let me ask a few questions on that. Did you have to have a visa for this race?
Do not.
No. Okay. Now, as far as getting a rental car in another country, how did that work?
It was pretty easy.
Really?
We got to the airport. I mean, we had reserved the car online ahead of time, of course, and then you get to the airport and the rental car place is there. So the hardest part was finding the rental car shuttle to get us over to where the cars were. But once we got there, you know, with all of our luggage, got a car, jumped in the car had navigation. So, you know, we got to listen to this really nice European voice talk to us and direct us because we couldn't read a sign anywhere. So, you know, but I'm pretty good with directions. So it wasn't too bad, you know, and it was once you got out of the airport, it's pretty much a straight shot to the town we were going.
Okay. Now, did y'all have to get different SIM cards for your phones? Or did y'all use your phones? Wi-Fi only?
Yeah, we had our phones, so we just called our cell phone carrier and told them we're traveling international and got an international plan going. So texting, internet, all the data was, you know, kind of covered under that. Now, phone calls, we just tried not to take phone calls because I think they were going to charge you 20 cents a minute or something on a phone call. So
are y'all with Verizon, AT&T?
We use Sprint.
Sprint, okay.
So yeah. So
y'all had decent coverage over there?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, I mean, I was able to communicate back home with people via text and talk to my friends over there, you know, that were in Denmark racing with me. You know, I had several athletes that I knew from other parts of the country over there that we got to meet up. So that was really quite fun, and that's one of the things I love about racing these international world championships races, that you make a lot of new friends, and then, you know, you got friends from all over the country that are part of Team USA that live in other states. And then, you know, as part of Team F2C, I got athletes from Canada, Mexico, other places that we're all friends, and we converse on our Facebook groups, and then we get to see each other in person at a race like this.
Right. Now, to go ahead and dive down this rabbit hole, what happened with the bike?
Yes. So I have a Trek Speed Concept tri-bike. Really love this bike with my SRAM Red E-Tap wireless shifting.
How old is it?
Packed it all up in my Sycon bag. You know, I researched the heck out of these bags, right? Watched them pack these bikes in bags and see all the pro cycling teams use them. It's a soft-sided bag, but it's got all, you know, it's got hard places, you know, where it should be, right? And so I packed it, put it on the airlines, good old KLM, and, you know, we flew over to, you know, got to Copenhagen, got my bike, put it in the rental car, drove out to the hotel. I go wheeling it into Team USA bike mechanic room so I can pull it out and put it together, get ready to maybe, you know, go for a ride. As I unzip the back of the bag, and I look in the bottom of the bag, and I'm like, why is my derailleur with this big hunk of frame attached to it dangling in the bottom of the bag? So there's a couple other athletes around. We started looking. We got closer, realized they broke my back there, my derailleur hanger and frame and stuff. So my derailleur is just laying in the bottom of the bag, loose. So obviously I don't have a bike that's working. So I go talk to Lauren and Meg, our Team USA team managers, and they tell me about a bike shop they just came from. So my wife gets out her phone and the whole Google Map thing and to lead us over to this bike shop. We get in this bike shop. They were a Trek dealer, and I ride Trek and some other stuff. I had pictures that I'd taken of my bike, and they, from the pictures, nobody could tell what the damage was. But basically, they said, we don't have any hangers or parts here. I said, well, will you rent me a bike? And they said, we don't rent bikes. And I'm like, well, you got all these bikes on the showroom floor. And they said, we don't rent any of those. Those are for sale. You want to buy one, you can buy it. I'm like, all right, fine. Well, while we were in there, Dave's 78. He races as a 78-year-old for Team USA. This guy is awesome.
Wow.
Still kicking. He's my hero. So Dave says,
Dave.
Hey, there's this other shop over here. So my wife's like, all right. So my wife and I get together with Dave, and he walks us to this other shop. And we go walking in there, and old Matthias, the kid working there, we start talking to him and explain what happened. Show him pictures, and he's just kind of looking at us. You know, he's sort of quiet, and he's like, well, we don't have any bikes for rent. And I'm like sitting there going, man, really? No, nothing? Come on, you can do something for me. And I'm looking around his showroom there, and they sell Aragon and Kuota or something. And over on in the corner is this Kuota, I think is how you say the brand. I don't know. I've never seen the brand of bike before. This road bike sitting there, and I'm like, I look at it, and it says medium on it. And I said, what's a medium? I ride a 56. Is that a 56? And he's like, yeah, it's somewhere 54, 56, whatever, something in that size range. And I'm like, great, rent me this bike. And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you like? And then he says, I like beer. And I said, great. And I go walking down the street, buy him a 12-pack of beer, come back. We're like, you're going to rent me this bike, right? You know? And he's like, all right, I talked to the owner of the shop. We'll rent it to you for you know, whatever, 1,000 krona or something like that for the 2 days you need it. And so we made a deal with him. So I had to bring my bike as collateral and leave my tri-bike in the case at the shop while I had their bike. We took my carbon aero wheels out of the case and put it on this bike. So we put some carbon brake pads on it and put my wheels on it. But you know, and my pedals, of course, to go with my shoes. But the bike, you know, is an entry-level carbon bike with Ultegra mechanical, so it's not quite the race bike and aerodynamics and the positioning of a Trek speed concept that I should have raced on. So, but I had a bike. I was on the start line. I'm doing a race, so I was happy.
Okay.
And during this whole thing, I stayed extremely relaxed, calm, and positive. I never freaked out. I never got mad. When I saw my bike was broke, I thought about going into tears for a second, and then I just looked at my wife and I said, I'm not going to let this ruin your vacation. I said, we're going to have fun. We're going to figure this out, and I'm going to get on the start line. And so I just stayed really positive, and there we go. Found me a bike.
Okay. Now, before you actually got that bike, you had talked beforehand, before we got on to the actual interview, about some athletes that already offered you their bike.
So yeah, that actually came up the next day when I was waiting to pick up the bike. So on Wednesday is the day I made the plan with this bike shop to rent me this bike. And they said, come back the next morning and drop off your bike and we're going to do this. Well, I got there at 10 a.m. right when he said he would open. Actually, I was there before him. I was just sitting there waiting on the street with my bike ready to go. And then he goes, okay, what time do you need the bike? And I said, well, bike check-in is between these hours, so I need it by this time at the latest, you know? So, because I thought he was just going to help me switch it over all on site, but he didn't. So I left all my stuff with him and took off. for the day, and he told me come back at noon. So I went and did packet pickup and hang out. While I was at packet pickup, I was talking to a couple other athletes that I know, and they're like, well, we don't race your race. We're racing other races during the week. So if you want, you can use mine. You know, this friend of mine on USA, I mean, he had a 54 centimeter road bike, so really small. And then same with this other F2C athlete who he had his tri bike, but it was about a 54 centimeter also. So it was too small for me, but it would allow me to race. And they both offered me up their bikes and said, you can use it if you want. And I said, well, this guy is supposed to rent me a bike. I don't have it yet. So I got this as backup. So it was really nice. It was awesome that there's people willing to step up and help out and, you know, sympathize with me, because I was nervous that this bike I had made an agreement to rent wasn't going to be ready for me. Because then when I went back at noon, the bike still wasn't ready and my pedals were still just laying on the counter at the shop and he hadn't done a thing. And I'm like, dude, what's up? Like, I have to check this bike in the next hour or so. That's the rules, you know?
Right.
And so I left for another hour, came back, and the bike was ready. And I was like, great. So then I took the bike back that I rented to my Team USA mechanics. I went and saw Drew, and Drew went through the bike for me and just made sure it was all solid and shifting right. And we got the seat height right. The only adjustment I could do to the bike was try to get the seat height as close to what I needed as I could. The handlebars, stem, none of that fit me right. It was all too big and wide and whatever. But we got that, and I took the bike out for a quick 25-minute little ride, and just to make sure it all shifted and rode. And then I came back, checked it into transition. It was time to race the next day.
Wow. So once you get everything set up, you check your bike in and you leave transition area. This is on Thursday, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
After you leave transition, I'm assuming it's around 3:00.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. So what kind of meal are you wanting to get the night before your race?
So my standard pre-race meal is I seek out fish usually. I want salmon or halibut or some sort of fish, and I like it pretty plain. I don't want a lot of sauces or spice on it. I want things pretty mellow. I like my bread and then some sort of potato with it, you know. So I'm not the pasta type of carb guy. I usually am a fish and potato kind of guy. Maybe some asparagus or green beans in there if it's an option. But I keep everything pretty mellow as far as sauces and spice or any of that goes. It's just kind of simply grilled. That's what I want. So that's what we went and had. And my one glass of red wine.
Nice. Now, you get back to your hotel. What time do you try getting in bed?
So that night, this is the tough thing in Denmark is the sun never sets there. So, sun was going down about 10:30, 10:45 at night. And I was trying to go to bed at like 8:30.
Wow.
And it's bright light out, you know? I mean, so yeah, I think we usually go to dinner about 6:00 in the evening, have our dinner, try to get back to the hotel, just kind of relax a little bit, maybe read a little something, and then lay down by 8:30, 9:00 and try to start falling asleep.
Okay. So what time do you wake up on race day?
So race day now, I kind of like this race because this race starts later than most races. So this race originally was scheduled to start at my wave was supposed to start at 9:45. So I prepared myself for that. Now, little did we know until that morning that the race is going to get bumped back to 10:30. So that kind of threw nutrition plans and warm-up plans a little out of whack for everybody because you got a 45-minute delay in race. So I got up that morning and went down to the hotel to have breakfast about 6:15 in the morning. So I had my breakfast down there about 6:15 in the morning, and then went back up to the room, finished getting ready, and then I think by 8:00 in the morning or something like that, I was probably heading down to transition to finish, anything I needed to do in transition, and then get out and do my little warm-ups, drop my gear bag check, all that kind of stuff.
Gear bag check.
Yeah. So, your warm-ups and whatever you're wearing that morning as warm-ups. Then you could go and drop a bag, and then your clothes would be there when you finish the race. They'd be at the finish line.
Okay.
So they had a bag check for that.
For people that don't have Sherpas.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I had a Sherpa that could have took it, but it's nice to just, I let, the wife and daughter stay in bed, and I just kind of rolled on my own. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Because that's my first thought. When somebody says morning clothes bag, I'm like, you don't have a Sherpa? Like that one in the other. They're like hand in hand now.
Right.
Now, once you actually get everything ready in the morning of, you have to wear the Roca USA team jersey, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have to buy that on your own, or is it provided for you?
You pay for it on your own.
Okay.
So
how much was it?
Oh, what do those cost? Probably a couple $100.
Okay.
Something like
that. Is the quality pretty good?
Yeah, I'm actually a Roca sponsors my team, me. So I'm a Roca athlete anyway. So I'm used to their products and I like them. So yeah, it's a really nice race suit.
Okay. Now, did you have the sleeve, or is it mandatory to have the singlet version? What is it like?
It's more like a singlet version. They don't for Team USA. They don't offer us the full sleeve suit. They just offer you. I mean, I race a one-piece suit, not a two-piece. But that's what it is. So it's kind of like the sleeveless style.
Okay. Just to get a better understanding of everything.
Yep.
Now, whenever you get everything ready in transition and leave transition, you're basically walking out in what you're going to be wearing and socks and shoes.
Correct. Okay. Since this is a duathlon and not a triathlon,
right?
A little different to get used to. So, because obviously in triathlon you would have been leaving your run shoes and everything behind, and you're walking barefoot or something down the beach with a wetsuit. But here that's kind of nice thing about duathlon is I can wear socks. I don't have to go sockless because, and for me this year at World Championships, I used 2 pair of running shoes.
Really?
So I use 1 pair of running shoes for the 10K and then I use a different pair for the 5K.
Wow.
Part of it was for transition setup. So the way transition was at this race in Denmark, it was down in a parking garage. Okay. So down underneath in this covered parking garage. And we had buckets next to our bikes. And everything had to be in the bucket. Helmet, everything, shoes, da-da-da. But if you use 2 pairs of running shoes, they allowed you to keep the second pair of run shoes out like you normally would for transition to grab quick and slide on. And so and because I run in different shoes, so I really love the Adidas Ideos Boost as a racing flat, as a running shoe when I'm doing open running races. But it's not a quick shoe to put on in a transition when you're coming off of a bike and you're barefoot and you need to put it on. So it was a perfect shoe to wear for the 10K. Because it's already on you to start the race, and you can go out and run your 10K, and you're in this racing flat that you really like, and then I have speed laces in it. I could slip it off really fast, throw it in my bucket, grab my bike, and go. And I leave my bike shoes clipped in and rubber band to the bike so that you can do the flying mount and go. And then that way, and then for my second 5K, I use a New Balance 1500, their shoe, because that's more my triathlon type shoe because it's got a little loop on the back. So when you're sliding your foot in, you got something to grab and slide your foot in there when you're coming from that, and it just goes on. And it's a little bit more, the upper's a little bit better when I'm going barefoot, but obviously in this race I wasn't. So that's why I kind of went the 2 shoe system.
Okay. Now, as far as setting things up in transition to save you as much time as possible, because speed is king here and time is money, literally. So
correct.
How did you set things up in order to get things as fast as possible?
So that's where with the bike shoes, they're clipped into the bike, they're rubber band on, right there in position. So when I run, I can run my bike out in my socks after I kick off the first shoes. Because here we had to do stuff in a bucket. I had my helmet. Basically, I wear a Rudy Project Boost 01 Road Aero helmet with the visor. So I run the first 10K. I wear sunglasses, but then I just pitch those with my first pair of run shoes in the bucket, and it doesn't matter where they landed. And then my bike helmet was sitting upside down with the straps out so I could quickly throw it on my head the right way, buckle it, and go. And so that's how going out on the bike I was. I mean, it was all ready to go. I mean, literally it's just like throw stuff in the bucket, throw the helmet on, grab bike, go, because everything's on the bike, ready to go. And get out in transition. When we come in from the bike, as I'm riding into transition, I'm pulling my feet out of the shoes, leaving the shoes clipped into the pedals. And then same thing. I racked the bike. My second pair of run shoes is sitting right there. But for the second run, I did not grab sunglasses because that would have meant digging into my bucket to find them. So I stay as fast as I can. I just quick throw on the shoes and go.
Okay.
Yep.
So you leave transition and then you head over to the start line, not your swim start, your start line. How does that atmosphere feel to you?
Oh, it's it's exciting, you know. I mean, it was a bummer that the race got pushed back, but the weather was beautiful, so it was a really nice morning to be out there. You know, I get out, I'd like to do my run warm-ups. So, you know, I go out and run for 10, 15 minutes, nice and easy, you know, probably 30, 40 minutes before the race. Probably about 45 minutes before the race. But then they announced that the race was going to be kicked back. So that warm-up started to happen earlier than it normally would. So then I just kind of chilled for a while. And then as it started getting closer to when I knew we were going to go, then I get out and do some of my strides and jogs and warm ups. And then I usually load the corral about 5-10 minutes before race start. And I just get in there and I like to just talk to the other athletes and get myself loose. And I try to take I like to get in there and keep things loose, you know, and it's kind of fun because, like I said, the World Cup is going on in soccer and there's big matches that weekend. And so I was standing next to people from Brazil and France and wherever that had teams in it. And I just kind of, you know, get them all riled up a little bit together. And
yeah, because we didn't have a dog in that fight.
No, we did not. So, you know, my thing is always try to keep it loose, to not let nerves build, and try not to think too much about the race and what's going on. But I just want to stay calm and relaxed.
Gotcha. So what was your mindset going into this race?
My mindset was to get on that start line and make everybody hurt really bad if they wanted to beat me. When I race to push my limits. And I basically say, if I don't end up in medical tent, I probably didn't go hard enough. So I like to just leave it all out there.
Okay. So the gun goes off and it starts. How does those first few miles of the run go for you?
Well, the first mile was awfully quick and it was pretty tight course. So for us, we had ages 30 to 44 males all in one corral going off together. And it was probably only 600 meters and the road sort of narrowed into a tight little section and then, you know, kind of winded through these city streets around restaurants and stuff before it started to open up. So it was, everybody's pretty amped up. So the first mile was really quick and we were all trying to fight for position in there. And I was trying to just hold back and stay calm. I had picked a couple guys that I knew because I raced against them. I kind of know their paces and time. And I said, I'm going to hang back behind them and just see what they do and just kind of run by them a little bit. And so that's kind of how I did. And then after a couple miles of that first run, and I could see that they were laboring more than I was, and I was starting to feel pretty good. So then I just that's when I sort of put surges in and started getting away from them and quickly built. And then I knew that I was going to be on this rental bike and they were going to have their good bikes. So then my mindset was I need to really run this first 10K and build as much time as I can and then get on my bike and try to hold them off as long as I can because I know they're going to catch me eventually. And so that was kind of how I went at it.
Okay. And you had this 10K in 32 minutes and 13 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's pretty quick.
I felt pretty good that day. My running's feeling really good, which again, like we go back to my training, dialing back my miles this year and training in a different way, but focusing my runs on tempo and pace work has really allowed me to still have my confidence and run quick without my body being all beat up and broken down.
Gotcha. So you get to T1, which you're going to the bike from the run. Weird saying that, but how does that go for you?
Transition went fine. It was a really long transition. So, it's like a painted garage floor in this place and they kind of sort of taped down some felt paper that slipped and slide everywhere. So, you know, you're in a pair of socks trying to run on this stuff and wheel your bike out what seemed forever, which it was a pretty long way to the mountain line. It went fine. I mean, I felt like my transitions went pretty much as well as they could. For what we all had to deal with in there. So I was totally fine with the transition.
Okay. So you get out on the bike. How the first few minutes of the bike go on this rental bike?
They're a little tough. We had 20-mile-an-hour winds that day.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We had pretty much sustained 15 with gusts up in the 20-mile-an-hour. So we had pretty much crosswind most of the day on the bike or headwind. Almost no tailwinds. I don't know how it worked that way, but it was mostly crosswinds everywhere, the way the course meandered. So it was tough. I mean, I ride a bigger crank arm on my tri-bike that I'm used to, and now I'm on a compact crank to a road bike. So I was really spinning a lot, and I was, trying to get through these gears and everything else. And so, and the other athletes that I know and raced, as they caught up to me on the bike and passed me, they're just like all saying, dude, you're working way too hard to spin. I'm like, I'm maxed out, like gears. I'm spinning, I'm going, and my legs look like a hamster in a wheel. And that's just all I had, So it was, it was what it was. I made the best of it. I stayed positive even as those guys caught me. I mean, it took them 8 miles on the bike before they could catch me. I held them off for a little while, so I was feeling positive for a while. But once the guys I knew I was competing with caught me on the bike, because I had put that time in the 10K, then you kind of do the cat and mouse thing with them as long as you can, trying to hang with them as they'd pass, and you'd overtake them again and back and forth. And then once they just left me behind on the bike, it was, for just a second, you're just sort of mentally like, oh, and then you're just like, you know what, you just got to keep fighting and going, and let's just get to that finish line and make it happen. So you just kind of keep on riding. Now, mentally, how hard did you know how hard to push in the earlier stages of the bike versus the later stages of that bike ride? It's pretty short. I know. It's pretty short. So I can, and I know my endurance level's really high. I know I can push for a long time and sustain, and I recover quickly. So I just really put the hammer down, and I pretty much rode and pushing my limits as hard as I could, and mentally staying in it, fighting and chasing and going, knowing that, it's 40K bike. I mean, it's not, that's nothing, to me. So I can push my high intensity, sure. I had a couple moments in there where, you'd kind of feel fatigued a little bit. And so maybe I'd take a little 30-second kind of recover break and then bounce right back into a hard tempo. But it was pretty easy for me to stay engaged. I think the harder thing for me is I don't like wind, and the strong winds that day. That's what plays with you, because as a rider, you're putting out max effort and you're working so hard. And probably good for me is that because I was on a rental bike, I didn't have my Garmin, so I didn't have any kind of data. I had zero data to look at when I was racing. I had no idea how fast I was going. No cadence meters. I had nothing. And so, but you can tell by perceived effort level that right. You're working your tail off. And, you're hurting, but you're not like going the speed you should for that, Right. Now, if we think about it from a coach's standpoint and look at it through a little bit of a different filter here, athletes would need to know their body at an RPE level and not just rely on data for this exact situation in a race. 100%. I believe in perceived effort the most. And I race and try to tell athletes to train and race on perceived effort level more than hard data of saying run a 480 seconds. No, run it on a perceived effort level of this. Same with biking and this and that. Because I think obviously as coaches, as athletes, we love all the data, right? And we want to look at it afterwards. I don't want to look at it so much during the race. I want to look at it afterwards, especially in a short race like this where it's intense. In Ironman's a little different because you can't burn your matches early, and you got to think about how you're going to ride 112 miles and run a marathon. So heart rate and some of that stuff probably comes into play a little more than it does in a short, intense race. So here, definitely, it's all about perceived effort, and you got to learn that stuff. And it takes time to learn that as an athlete, to learn how to push your body's limits. But luckily, I mean, that's my thing is I push my body's limits, and I know like it's there, and you just always look for that next gear. Right. And you know how hard to push because you've done this and you have the experience with that. Correct. So if you race and train based on perceived effort, where you're learn how your body cues are, your breathing, your different things like that, and you go, but don't focus on what the watch is, but look at the watch after, you start to learn like, okay, when I feel this way, I'm probably running at this pace. Or when I feel this way, my bike splits, I'm probably kicking out this type of power or whatever. You start to, so mentally you can kind of do that stuff in there. And I like what helps keep me sometimes going is doing math in my head when I'm out there, so you're running and you see the splits and it tells you you're at 15K of the bike or 20K of the bike. And you're like, all right, well, I got this much more to go. Maybe I can see an overall clock and know how overall I've been out there. So you start kind of doing math and thinking in your head where you're at and what you got to do to somewhat, because when I go into a race, I try to want to know roughly my times where I'm at, not necessarily paces, but hey, I should be at this point of the race at this time or whatever,
Right. Now, the last mile or two of the bike ride, are you doing anything to prepare you to start running, or are you literally hammering all the way in?
I'm pretty much hammering most of the way in, and I'm focusing on getting the last drinks of my fuel mix that I can get into me.
Okay.
Before that last run. So again, like we talked about, I use the F2C, and I use glycodurance, which is a carbohydrate electrolyte type of mix. And I'm trying to, throughout my bike ride, I'm fueling with that, and I'm trying to get that bottle into me. I have a 20-ounce bottle with me on the bike, and I want to get that into me because that's my power, my fuel that's going to help me into that 5K run. Even though they're handing out, lucky for me, F2C was the sponsor of this race, and they were handing it out on the run course so I could get more. But in my mindset, I'm trying to get that stuff into me, and I'm trying to get those last few drinks so I don't have to grab so much on the run, to make sure I'm hydrated up. And then otherwise, I'm just trying to keep my cadence up. Like I said, in my training, I really train by cadence. So for me, it's if my legs are fatigued or whatever, I'm really focused on maintaining that high cadence that I want to come off the bike and run in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, as far as T2 goes and getting out on the run, walk me through that.
Now, that was tough coming off of this rental bike. Because when I went to jump off this bike and run to, through T2, this saddle I rode on was not so good. And my butt hurt so bad. And I was not used to racing on a road bike. I'm used to racing on a tri-bike. And as those of you that ride understand the geometry of a road bike to a tri-bike. And there's a reason why we race on tri-bikes and we come off them racing better because of the way the seat tube is and everything else that brings you up over the cranks. And I was on a road bike that wasn't even fitted to me, so we didn't have any adjustments to slide the saddle as much forward as you can to get yourself into a bike position I'm used to riding in. So when you hammer out a 40K in that kind of wind on a bike that doesn't fit good, your butt, legs, everything feels really off. So it was my run through transition was uncomfortable. trying to get the bike racked and get my shoes on and get out on that 5K run. It was different.
And you still had a pretty quick transition of just over 2 minutes, and then you're out on the run. How does the first few miles of the run go? Or actually, hold on, wait. There's only the first few miles here. So how is the first 800 yards here?
That was uphill. That was like no, there's 2 hills in the run course. So, but coming out of transition is a parking ramp hill. So it's like this steep parking ramp hill to get out of the parking ramp and get out onto the run course. It went all right. I think the first mile went relatively okay. My legs felt really kind of weird, again, from that bike position. Normally I feel really good coming off my bike running and I really like it, but this felt a little off. And the temperatures were getting warm. So, I think the first mile went okay. And then I started to kind of, ease into things. And, by the end, I was getting pretty warm, I think, even though max temperature was 72 and sunny, but it was, when you're pushing max effort and running, your body heats up like 20 degrees. So your body's feeling like it's 90 at that point,
Right. Now with that, did you know what place you were in at this point?
I did not. I knew that, I didn't know the overall place, but I knew there was a guy ahead of me that I was chasing, because there was another American, super nice guy. He's great, and I'm super happy for him. But obviously, I'm competitive. I wanted to beat him. I wanted to be the number 1 American, right? And I knew he was ahead of me because I saw him pass me on the bike, and I fought with him on the bike for a long time. So I knew he was up there. I just didn't know how far. And so I didn't catch him, but I did get passed by I think he was from Sweden or Denmark or somewhere. I think a Denmark athlete maybe, or a Switzerland, whatever. He passed me on the run with about a mile to go, and then I ended up catching him with about 600 meters to go and passing him and getting 10th place, and he was 11th. So I kind of, he looked strong coming on the run, and I felt at a moment where I felt a little weak, but then I saw him up ahead as I knew we were coming down this straight before we made a turn to go to the finish line, and I just that's when you sort of dig in and find that extra gear to say, all right, one more place, one more push, let's go get it. And that's what I did.
Okay. So as far as the run course goes, how did that go for you?
I really love this run course. I thought it was a great run course because it was through the city. There's a lot of spectators out because you're kind of running through this town where there's all these restaurants and coffee shops and stuff. So a lot of people were out spectating, and I thought that was fun. And it was loops. So for the 10K, it was 2 loops. Obviously 5K, we only did the 1 loop. But it was a really nice run course, mostly flat, it had 1 hill in it. And of course the 1 hill you had to go up was headwind, so we got the double whammy, but overall I thought the run course was really a nice course. Nice. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. The last 800 yards of the run course, how was that?
It was nice. It was actually the shaded area of the course. So you rounded, you passed where you would normally go to transition, and you make this little left-hand turn. And right there, you're on cobblestones, which I didn't like. Cobbles are hard to run on, but then you make this right turn, and then it's a smooth, sidewalk. And then that's a tree-lined sidewalk. So then you kind of go up that. You make another left turn and another left turn, and then you head into the finish line and down the blue carpet and in. So it was and it was all flat at that point. You just had those couple turns up there. It was, short and a little section of cobbles, but for the most part, it was good.
Okay. Now, were you sprinting as hard as you could possibly go at this point?
I don't know about that. I was pushing, a pretty good tempo pace, but I didn't go into an all out type of sprint, I guess. Once I passed that other athlete and I kind of knew I was past him, I just kept a pretty hard tempo going, all the way to the finish line.
So you left some on the table?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I was going pretty hard. I was going pretty. I guess I was going as hard as I could, but I would say that my sprint didn't feel like if somebody said, "Let's race 100 meters." Okay. If that makes sense. That makes any sense. You're pouring it on, and I'm racing as hard as I can and pushing my body as hard as I can. But the way my stride and my form and stuff are, it's not like I was doing a 100-meter sprint. If that makes sense.
It does completely.
Yeah.
So after you crossed the finish line, what'd you do next?
I pretty much just stood there, put my hands on my knees, and asked somebody to unzip the back of my suit so I could pull it down. And I got a cold towel, threw it over my head, and then walked off. And the first thing we came to was, luckily for me, some more F2C, and they were there mixing up some 3-to-1 protein shakes, and so I just sat there guzzling cups of that.
Nice. So you didn't go to medical?
No, not here. I didn't need to. I know I usually do, but I held it together at this race, I guess. I think the temperatures helped me. Usually, because I was in medical, and I did a race just this past Sunday when I got back from Denmark, and we had super hot, humid temps, and that's usually what gets me, is that my body temp just completely overheats. And so when I hit, I basically got to maybe go to medical and either get an IV or go jump in the big tub of ice until I cool down.
Okay. Now, what's something that you learned about this race that you would want to tell someone that hasn't done this race before?
To do a duathlon?
Yeah.
Racing the sport of duathlon it really is about, I'd say the key workouts are the bricks. And I would say it's not just about doing bricks in the way we think of in triathlon, where you bike and then you jump off your bike and go for a run, but doing the run before you bike. And I think that gets to be, in duathlon, that's one of the harder things. And it's what I think makes this sport really harder than a triathlon in some ways, because in swimming, I feel that you can stay a little bit more relaxed and not elevate your heart rate so much. I mean, you swim hard, right? And some swimmers swim hard, but for whatever reason, it's a different sport. It's a different body motion than running and the pounding. You're in water and you're going through it, where in this, when you got to run a 10K, and you got to run a 10K at a pretty high intense level, and then hit the bike, and then now go pound the bike hard, and still have something left to run a 5K at a high intensity. It's a different way of getting ready, and it's pretty intense. So I think the brick workouts are really the key, and to get used to running and then trying to bike hard.
Okay. Now, how could ITU have made your race experience as an athlete better?
I don't know if they could have. I thought it was really well done. ITU does a nice job at the races. Their officials are out there. They're really on it. I thought it was a nice race course. The only flaw really, I would say, in the day is that for whatever reason, they couldn't get the course ready, and it delayed start by 45 minutes. Otherwise, I think everything went, from, the transition being down a parking garage and how long and whatever. That's weird. It's different. It's not what we're used to, but every athlete had to go through it. So I think from how they handled everything, it went fine.
Okay. Now, we covered a lot. Do you have anything else to add about your race?
Not, that particular race, probably not. I mean, I went there, with a goal in mind of chasing a podium. And once, I think the biggest thing for athletes is dealing with adversity. And I feel like what this race did for me with my bike breaking and me having to scramble and adjust and get a rental bike and change my whole strategy and deal with that. I think that's, as athletes, one of the biggest things that we all need to learn and how to deal with. And what I'm most proud with is how I dealt with the adversity that I had to go through just to get on the start line and then get to the finish line. And, a lot of people that, a lot of my friends were like, how are you dealing with this? How are you staying so positive and calm? Your bike's broke. You don't know what's going on. You got this. And you're like, what else am I going to do? I mean, you have to. And I think, during the course of a race too, there's many times where all of a sudden you might get a side stitch, something, it takes a lot to get the perfect race, right? And more often than not. So it's just dealing with adversity.
Now with that, if this would have happened to you 10, 11 years ago when you were entering the sport and getting into the sport, you probably would have dealt with this a lot differently than you did this time.
I agree. I would have for sure. I was a lot more intense back then and a lot more, piss and vinegar and anger in me or something, Right. So I probably would have had a little bit more of an explosion, but for whatever reason in my older age here, I'm starting to calm down and find the way to deal with this stuff a lot better and just embrace it and enjoy it and just keep moving forward.
That makes sense. Now, I only have a few more questions for you before we wrap up here. What races are on your bucket list?
On my bucket list, well, I need to race another Ironman again because I still someday want to be at Kona. And I've done 2 Ironmans. One went pretty good. One went terribly wrong. So hopefully someday I'll be there. Otherwise, for me, it's the experiences and where the races are, location. I loved racing in Canada last year in British Columbia. So, next year I've been toying going to Whistler to either do the half Ironman or Ironman there, just because I love BC, places like that. So, and I love doing these world championship races wherever they take us. So, bucket list races. I mean, I've run Boston 9 times. I've run New York. I've run Chicago marathons. I've done those. So it's really, really more about just probably locations.
Are you going to do the majors?
I would like to run London and Berlin marathons, but I don't think I'd get to Tokyo and add that one in. So I'm missing.
That one's just so hard to get into.
Well, London's probably the hardest to get into. Tokyo's probably pretty hard too, but I'm enjoying my time away from marathoning right now. So I'd say more of my focus and dreams and stuff. I really like to, probably a bucket list for me is to race long course duathlon world championships, which is in Zofingen, Switzerland. So I just need to sign up for national tips of long course and qualify.
Right. So what's next for you?
Next is a couple local races that I'm using more as training, Olympic distance and sprint distance triathlon to get ready for when I go over to ITU World Championships of Triathlon in the Gold Coast of Australia in September.
And you're going to race that with your daughter?
I'm racing with my daughter. So I got a 15-year-old daughter who qualified to race world championships in the sprint distance. And then I raced the Olympic distance. So it's pretty special for me to be able to say that her and I are on Team USA together.
Wow. Who's her coach?
Well, it depends on which sport. She's got a pretty good swim coach. And the other 2 disciplines, Dad sort of helps out.
That's awesome. So how can athletes follow you?
So you can get on Twitter. My Twitter is Gotta Have Heart, where there's 2 T's. I'm on Facebook just under my name, Mike Buenting, or I have a Facebook business page, Gotta Have Heart Training. Those are probably, I don't have the Instagram thing yet. That's for the kids. I'm a little old for that, but maybe I'll get one.
You got to get on there. There's so many people on there. It's definitely worth it.
Right.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I only have one more question for you, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
My definition of a perfect race would be basically the race you dream of. That race where you wake up and you've got the right conditions, temperature. Actually, no, I'm going to stop because you never hardly ever get that. The perfect race is starting and going through your race and staying positive the whole way. And when anything comes at you that's going to try to take you off track and get you negative, you overcome that and you stay, you just overcome the adversity and you keep pushing and fighting through, and you just basically go out there and leave everything on the course. And when you cross that finish line, you can look back and say, I got no regrets. I gave everything I had today. I didn't and you don't mess up your nutrition. You got to have that. Nutrition's a big piece, but it's not always. A friend of mine always said once, it's not about finish times, but about finish lines. And so sometimes the perfect race can be simply not about that goal time, but just getting across that finish line because you had to overcome a lot of obstacles to get to that finish line.
Right. Well, that's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you again, Mike, for sharing everything about the ITU World Championship Duathlon. I've enjoyed hearing about it, and I would love to have you back on after the one in Gulf Coast. Is it Gold
Coast, Australia. Yeah. September. I'd love to.
That'd be great if you would come back on and tell me about that race. Hopefully you don't have any snafus with the bike.
No, I'm using Tri-Bike Transport, no airline, so it should get there safely. And I've worked really hard on my swim this year, so I'm anxious to go line up in a race of that level and see the progress of my swimming. And I also know that Jaws is down there somewhere, so I'm trying not to be last in the swim so I don't get eaten by the sharks.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I enjoyed this, and I look forward to following you in the future, okay?
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, have a good day.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoy the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.